As if the pandemic wasn't enough, America finds itself rocked with civil unrest and a growing culture war. The murder of George Floyd has sparked an increasingly violent debate about the role of law enforcement in our society, if not the role of government itself. Welcome back to This Will Happen. I'm John Jordan. What is the role of local government in our society? What do they owe us, and who is responsible for the breakdowns in city governments? But here's what no one is talking about. Law enforcement excesses and abuses are just the tip of the iceberg. And the fact is that the injuries to people of color would still continue. Consider, African American poverty rates are 2.5 times those of Caucasian Americans. Our system of public education has failed generations of people of color. Local governments, who by the way hire and oversee police departments, have allowed a culture to fester on both sides. As a result, local government fails in its most basic task, protecting the lives and safety of its citizens. So who is responsible? Joining us today is Natalie Jackson, a former fellow naval officer and civil rights attorney in Florida. Ms. Jackson notably represented Trayvon Martin's family in civil litigation. Ms. Jackson is an experienced and effective litigator, representing clients in numerous high-profile cases. Also with us is Larry Elder, again, an attorney and nationally known analyst and commentator. Natalie and Larry, welcome to This Will Happen. See, I would see the failures here on the part of the country, the systemic failures, much broader than just police. For example, I think you clean up all the police misconduct and make police departments perfect across the country tomorrow morning, and we are still left with huge injustices and a huge set of problems. So I see this as a much bigger issue and something that should be leaned into far more than just what we're talking about on cable TV every night.
The rally is, and the rally cry is Black Lives Matter. It is about the economic system. It's about what's going on financially. Black Lives Matter is it's a social cry. It's not really an organization where there's a leadership that's speaking. It is really an adaptation, and I can tell you what I think, but I don't speak for everyone in Black Lives Matter. I don't think that the protests are strictly defined or restricted to the police. I think that was just the catalyst. It was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. This is a government problem that is happening in every state, and it's affecting everyone. Now, what we have seen is that the systemic racism in conjunction with the failure of government has affected disproportionately Black people.
Yeah, well, I would bring Larry in. So Larry, how do you see this?
Well, not too surprisingly, I see it very differently. Last year, all the homicides in this country, half of the victims were Black. And they weren't killed by Confederate generals. They weren't killed by white police officers. They were almost always killed by another Black person. In the last 50, 60 years, according to the Center for Disease Control, the percentage at which the police have killed Blacks have declined 75%, while the percentage of the whites being killed by the police has pretty much flatlined. The problem is the data just does not just show this so-called systemic racism. If anything, the data suggests that police officers are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on the Black suspect than on the white suspect. And in my opinion, what this Black Lives Matter movement has done is it's encouraged officers to pull back, and therefore crime has gone up. And it's given young Black men the false impression that if they get pulled over, they're going to be harassed, if not physically attacked, and therefore there's heightened a sense of anxiety, creating more confrontations than would otherwise be the case. The number one problem facing Black America is not bad cops. If we had a vaccine to get rid of all the racism, to get rid of all the racist cops, the primary problems facing the Black community would still remain. Number one, absent fathers. 70%
Okay, Larry, I'm going to stop you because you can't say these statistics without any backing up. All the statistics you are quoted are not true. They're simply not true. Just because you say it does not make it true.
I didn't stop you.
No, because I didn't spout statistics without having any sort of statistical data that is saying. I didn't say the CDC said that 75% of homes don't have.
No.
This sounds the interview is going to go on.
Larry gets to have his say. I mean, you'll have an ample opportunity to rebut it, Natalie.
Interview's over. I'm gone.
Natalie.
Bye, Larry.
You know, I mean, how about, two lawyers, two naval officers pick it up? I'm sorry that Larry felt the need to do that, but the numbers he cited.
But the problem with these type of interviews, that Larry and his ilk always spout statistics that are just not true. And when you say it enough, people think that they're true. That is the problem. I didn't say any statistics because I don't have any way.
So here's a question that I wanted to ask this. I wanted to get Larry's take on this. And, is Black Lives Matter changing? Is it becoming something else as this is going on? Because it looks like it's a different matter. It's starting to look different from me. It's starting to look like a lot of, frankly, coffee shop Marxists now.
Well, I think first you have to define, what do you think Black Lives Matter is? Because that is, you must have a common definition before you can start a conversation.
Well, let me tell you what I thought it was in the beginning. It was a movement. It was around the time when you were representing Trayvon Martin's families when it was started. And then it was a declaration that we want an affirmation that Black lives matter. That affirmation, and that there be accountability in law enforcement and respect for Black lives where necessary and appropriate administrative changes in law enforcement to take place. That's what I saw it as then. I'm starting to see it as something different now. Actually,
I think one of the geniuses of that, because it was a hashtag, as you know.
Yeah, that started.
Yeah, and that was one of the geniuses of it. There was never a centralized organization, so no one could say it's mine. It's like anonymous, no one can say it's mine. Anyone can be it. Anyone can take it up the charge and make it into what they want to. It was a look at rioters, who've taken up the charge, as opposed to people, organizers, activists and organizers who have taken up the charge and actually brought in systemic plans. It just depends on who's saying it.
But there are foreign actors involved too, seeking to sharpen and exploit this. And this is being weaponized. And there are domestic elements inside the United States that are white people that are seeking their own agenda that has nothing to do with people of color. And I fear that this is morphing in that direction.
So when you're talking about that, anytime that you have division, people can take advantage of those divisions and those weaknesses. That's what propaganda is. That's what, that's what intelligence communities do for militaries and governments, be it our government or foreign governments. And if you allow them to stop your movement, where is democracy?
Exactly.
Yeah. The way to counter that, which will happen no matter what, and no matter what movement, no matter what, the way to counter that is to fix the problems and fix the fractures so that there are no chinks in the armor.
There is no accountability. Nobody is calling for accountability of local government. Like, for example, in Minneapolis, nobody is really calling for the removal of the city council and management of the Minneapolis Police Department. It's like it doesn't happen. It's like nobody wants to hold local governments, these elected officials, accountable.
I was talking to an activist, a young activist, 2 days ago, and she was telling me that they got a meeting with the government and with government officials, and that they were presenting their plan to him. And I said, don't you realize that's not the way it really should go? The government should be asking you for a meeting to present their plan to you. I agree with you. There has not been the accountability that should be called for. I think that every politician is expendable. I think if you're not doing your job, I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, you're all expendable. What happens in these cities is that you have systemic poverty levels, you have broken schools, you have people who are making a minimum wage trying to make a living. They are not at the city council meetings. They are not, those people are not. And the system is built like that to keep the people distracted so that they don't know what's going on.
I mean, there's lots of different shades of gray, this complex issue with regard to defund the police. How do you see that?
We've actually, frankly, asked police to do too much. We've asked them to be psychologists. We've asked them to be a paramilitary force. We've asked them to be community neighbors. And, we're asking for them to do too much when you can take some of that money, bring other departments in that are not the paramilitary type units and give that money to them and let them handle problems. If there's a mental health crisis with someone, let them handle problems. If there's a homeless crisis, police shouldn't be pouring out beer of homeless people. I think that when people hear defunding the police, they hear dismantle the police, and that's not the cry. If you're talking about defunding the police and using that money in other places so that the police budget isn't the largest line item in a city's budget, yes, I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, and it has to work for everybody, and it hasn't. And we have to acknowledge that and dive into these problems. Now, you and I may disagree on how to do that. I don't trust government bureaucrats. Look what they've wrought. If you trust government bureaucrats, look what they've built in America's cities.
John, you and I are the same there. There's another place we agree. And that's the funny part about it all, right? So we can be diametrically opposed on a political scale, but when we start really getting into the nuts and bolts of this, we agree on a lot of things. And that's what I found with all my friends. And that's why I think, we should continue the dialogue. We're not homogenous people. We're all going to think differently.
How does history play and the drama that is being played out around these statues? What are the roles of these statues and where is it going?
Once again, in a country where the people rule, which is what our country is, too far is whatever the people say is too far. So I don't think that anybody has, can draw that line. I don't think I can, because for me, too far might not be far enough for someone else. So it comes down to what the people say.
But just the tearing down and vandalizing, is that too far?
You're asking me personally, what is too far? I think personally, because I am Black, snatch down every doggone Confederate statue there is. To me, that's an act of terrorism every time I see one.
Right, they come into different categories. I agree with you on the Confederate statues, but then you have the ones like Thomas Jefferson. You have Thomas Paine. How far is too far?
If you're talking about founding fathers of America, for me personally, I think that they may have a place. But I understand the argument of people who don't.
But with regard to the American flag, the founding father, the Constitution, the reciting the Declaration of Independence, those touchstones, those icons of American history and our tradition, I think you have to look at the words and the challenge that those documents, that those symbols represent. We have become better and we've come further in so many ways because of the ideals laid out. And maybe, obviously we've come up short in so many ways, but they lay down a challenge that keeps us coming back to get better, which is why we make progress. And I think they are the marker that brings out the best in us and makes the progress that we've had possible and will make even greater things possible.
I tend to agree with you on that, on those limitations. But like I said, for me, I feel that it's really what people will tolerate. And it's the same thing with the Black Lives Matter movement. When we say that it morphed, this is because society has morphed. So as society morphs, then yes, things become less acceptable or more acceptable. So that's what the tolerance in a democracy is what makes a democracy great.
Hey, Natalie, I just wanted to say thanks for joining us today on This Will Happen. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time.
I enjoyed talking to you. I enjoyed listening to your views.
Although you won't see it on cable news, there is a hidden consensus that many state and local leaders have failed in their duty to provide protection, education, and fair administration of justice. Law enforcement can and must do a better job, but poverty, misery, and despair, and the resentment that go with them won't go away until local and state leaders do the basic work necessary to build thriving communities. There also appear to be other forces at work during these trying times. Organizations, individuals that need to see America hurt to pursue their own goals. Will Americans and the media call them out and confront them in public? Will we say yes, that Black and brown lives do matter, and that inner cities and their residents deserve to be safe from all bad folks? Will we stand up and say that it's wrong for a child's fate and future to be decided by their zip code? Will we get this done as Americans? When we can come together and get all of this done, it will be a great day for every American. I'm John Jordan, and I hope and pray that all of this will happen.